hearing this message later. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So, season finale, fats, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You may know this as you may not know because some of you are very, very young, not as old as I am. But when I was a little girl, this was the movie that my dad used to watch. It's an old movie. It's a Western that my dad loved watching. And it's so appropriate. I've used this for talking about fats for like the last 20 years because there are good fats, there are bad fats, and there are very, very bad fats. That's why I use it. But before anything, I just want to use the disclaimer. Sometimes I forget to put it, but I just want to make sure that you know this is not meant to be medical advice. It's just for educational purposes. Okay. So, number one. And number two, I always say the same. I know it's repeating, but there might be new people watching. That's why I always say the same. But today is really, really important that I let you know, especially for the new people who might be watching, that this presentation will follow the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. This is very important because I will try to clarify the misinformation that is out there regarding nutrition, especially regarding fats. And why it's so important to understand this, because this might be affecting us more than just physically, okay? And it's really, really important that we understand what the Bible says about our health and about what we need to eat, because it might be affecting us in more than just one way. That's why it's so important that we follow this advice to the law and the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. But here's the thing. It might appear that there's light in them. They might even quote the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. So it might even sound like they're telling the truth. That's how the enemy works. The truth is, or the error is always combined with truth, because otherwise it wouldn't be deceiving. You know what I mean? If it's all error, you would immediately know it's error. It wouldn't deceive anyone. So most deceit is quite a bit of truth combined with some error. That's how he makes you fall, the enemy. So unless you are very aware and unless you've studied the Bible and the spirit of prophecy and what it says, and you're very cognizant, you might not even notice the error. And now more than ever, these times is so important because our environment is more and more polluted. So it's harder to be as healthy as it was 100 years ago. There's a lot of chemicals in the environment. There's a lot of plastic. Everyone has plastic. I don't know if most of you understand how much plastic we have in our bodies. For reals. So that's why it's harder to be as healthy as our grandparents and great-grandparents were. So unless we're going the extra mile to really treat our bodies as a temple, it's going to be hard. And the other principle is to make sure that we're actually following the science. And here's where some people are like, why? We don't need science. Why would we need science? We have the Bible. I've been told this. And This is tricky, you guys. This is tricky because, well, the world, science is considered the world. And it's tricky. I understand. It's tricky. We're going to talk about this, okay? Because the spirit of prophecy, and I know I've read this many, many times, but today it's very important for this presentation. It's very important that we understand this principle. Because not all science is bad. Most science is actually good. It depends. It depends, okay? So yes, there is some science that we as Christians would question. What kind of science would that be? The science that you can't test, the science that you cannot observe, because it's science that occurred in, science that is based on things that occurred in the past that you can't see. Was anyone around when the Big Bang happened? You cannot observe that. You can't test it. Was anyone around when the supposed first cell formed in some pond, supposedly, right? Billions of years ago, somehow life appeared. Was anyone around when that happened? Can that be replicated in a lab? No. So that kind of science is questionable. It cannot be replicated. It cannot be observed. It cannot be tested. But there is science that can be done in a lab, that can be tested, that can be replicated, that can be studied. A knowledge of science of all kinds is power. And it is the purpose of God that advanced science, the kind that can be tested, can be replicated, can be studied, shall be taught in our schools as a preparation for the work that is to precede the closing scenes of Earth's history. When is that? When are the closing scenes of Earth's history going to happen? If they're not happening now, I don't know when. So closely is health related to happiness that we cannot have the latter without the former. A practical knowledge of the science of human life. What's the science of human life? The science of the body, physiology, biology is necessary in order to do what? Glorify God in our bodies. Isn't that part of the first angel's message? Okay, I know I say this all the time, but I just need to make sure I emphasize this because it's very important as a preamble of what I'm going to say next. Why? Because there's so much misinformation about the topic of today. Facts. There's just so much misinformation. It's just, yeah. So there's even misinformation about fats within the church. And I mean the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So, yes, there are people out there, social media, YouTube, saying that saturated fat. Okay, so here we are jumping right in. Saturated fat is good for you. Yep, saturated fat. So and that you don't have to worry about cholesterol. No, don't worry about it. And that most problems in for health are caused by carbohydrates. So don't worry about fat. Eat saturated fat, don't worry about it. And if your cholesterol goes up, it's okay. What they've been telling you all along, it's been a lie. Yeah. Yeah. So all of these things. Okay. So I've seen them. Now, most of this information comes from influencers that are non-Adventist. Okay. So if you go and do a search on YouTube, you'll find all these doctors. Most of them are doctors for reals. And here's the thing, okay? When the common person, lay person, goes online or someone sends you a Facebook post or a YouTube video, and you hear this renowned surgeon or famous doctor talking about this, well, of course, it's impressive. And here's what the doctors will say. Okay, I've heard this. I've seen these videos. I'm a heart surgeon and I've worked 40, 50 years and I discovered blah. What are you going to say? Well, this doctor knows more than me. I'm not a doctor. So what are you going to do? I mean, this is a respectable individual. He has years and years of education. Heart surgeon. What are you going to do? Well, of course. And he discovered something. He or she, could be a she. Isn't that impressive? What are you going to argue with a doctor? So most of this misinformation, I'm going to say it straight out, it's misinformation. And I'm going to give you the proof. Most of this misinformation comes from doctors. It's true. That's the root of the misinformation. And then it's spread out by what I'm going to call them health influencers, because they're the ones who repeat the misinformation. So it could be MDs, because not all doctors are MDs. It could be MDs or DOs. Those are doctors of osteopathy, which are all go through the same training as MDs, but they're also doctors. But it could also be doctors of chiropractics, right? They're also doctors. Or it could be NDs, which are doctors of naturopathy. It could be a lot of different kinds of doctors. But it could be MDs, which are very well-respected doctors. Surgeons even. Heart surgeons. Whoa, that's super impressive. I mean, who knows better than a heart surgeon? Okay, and so they'll tell you, well, I know, I work with these patients all my life. And I can tell you that cholesterol is not bad. I discovered that. FDA has been, or for whatever other agency, the World Health Organization, whatever, they've been lying to you. Wow. They have been lying to me. Oh no, right? And then the other option is that you hear a health influencer who's a little bit below a doctor, maybe a nurse, maybe, a coach, whatever other, or just someone who's just interested in health. Doesn't have to even be anyone who has any training. Might be no training whatsoever, but they quote the doctor. They say, This doctor says, and then they send you to the doctor, or they might even just quote him or her. He's this doctor, very well respected doctor, says. So they quote one source. One source. Right? So do you see the pattern here? It's either one doctor who says, I discovered, and everybody else is lying to you because I know the truth, or a health influencer who says, such and such doctor, this one person discovered something, and everybody else is lying to you based on this one doctor says. Now, does the doctor have studies? They might. They might have studies. And here's where the hard part comes. Okay, I'm going to be very honest with you. Here is where the difficult part comes for the lay person, because they might say, here's a study. Here's even a review. What's a review? A review is when they take a lot of studies and put them together. Oh, that's even more impressive, because when I showed you the hierarchy of evidence, let's go back. Systematic reviews are at the very top. So you're like, well, Dr. Maria Jose Hummel said that the reviews are the top of the hierarchy. Okay. That's tricky. I will admit that's tricky. Because the quality of the reviews depend on the quality of the individual studies that make up the review. Oh, okay. So then in that case, you need someone who knows how to read studies. I know that's not great. That's not great, because these studies are not easy to read. I will admit that is difficult. These studies have a lot of jargon. You kind of might need a little bit of training to read these studies. That's why you have me. I have the training to read the studies. You need a little bit of statistics, biostatistics, data analysis, research methodology, this kind of training to be able to read and analyze what's been done in these studies, to know the quality of the study. There's things you can do on your own. There's things, for instance, you can actually look at who's funding the study. Sometimes they reveal who's funding the study. So some of these studies, you can actually go look, oh, who's funding the study? Oh, meat is great, blah, 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 boom. And you go, oh, the beef association, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, that's easy to tell. But sometimes they're like, yeah, no conflicts of interest. It's hard to tell. So that's why you have someone like me. I can help you with that. But yeah, so the other way you can tell that easily tell that a study is not the greatest quality is, if it's a clinical study, is the number of subjects, number of individuals that are being studied. If it's less than 30, it's never going to be a good study. A study with less than 30 people is never going to have statistical significance. Hardly ever. So a small study, no, it's not gonna, one study with very few people, it's never going to be enough to prove anything. I can tell you almost hardly ever, okay? You can never say never, but hardly ever. Okay. So I want to establish something interesting. Okay. This is all me. Okay. This is my own theory here. Okay. I'm going to give you something that I think is a principle that the Bible establishes. And I've never heard from anyone. So this is all my own theory. Uh, so I'll share with you my thoughts about evidence. Okay. Evidence. And this is the following. Okay. The Bible establishes principles of evidence. I believe. I believe. So this is some of the things. Let me just make it a little bit bigger for you so you can see it. So these are some of the Bible verses that talk about evidence. Evidence, okay? So for instance, we have 2 Corinthians 13:1 that says, every fact shall be sustained and confirmed by the testimony of how many witnesses, you guys? How many? 2 or 3, not 1. One witness is never enough. Let's go to Matthew 18:16. It says, on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter shall be confirmed. Deuteronomy 19:15, a matter may be legally established only on the testimony of, again, how many? 2 or 3 witnesses. And Deuteronomy 17:6, same thing again. At the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, the person must be executed. They cannot be put to death on the testimony of only 1 witness. So what we see here is a principle, what I consider to be a principle. And it's a principle very important, I believe, that says that no important matter that requires evidence is enough. The evidence of 1 person is not enough. Do you see that here? The evidence of 1 person is not enough. That's what I see here that the Bible establishes as a principle. Now, it's not talking about science, but it doesn't matter. I think it's important that this is a principle that is established in the Bible, that the evidence of 1 person is not enough. You need 2 or 3 at the very least to establish evidence. Okay? Now, having said that, let's look at this. Let me make it bigger so you can see it. These are the kinds of evidence when it comes to information that we might see regarding science or information regarding nutrition or whatever. These are the different types of sources of information that we regularly encounter. We have popular newspapers and magazines containing news, articles written by reporters who may or may not be experts in the field of the article. Consequently, articles may contain incorrect information. It might be written by 1 journalist. Okay, so that's 1 source of information. We see articles written, whether it's in the news, posted on Facebook, for instance. Somebody posts an article and you read it. Oh, okay. Second, journals containing articles written by professionals or academics. It might even be something published in a journal, even by a doctor, but it's 1 author. Some trade or academic journals have articles that are written by a single person with little review. There's no peer review here. So there's even articles written on academic journals, but they're not peer reviewed. Although the articles are written by experts, and in particular, experts may have some ideas that are really out there. There's also books, by the way, written by experts, but they're not peer reviewed. See what I'm saying? Okay, and the last one is peer-reviewed or refereed or scholarly journals. These are articles that are written by experts, and they're also reviewed by several other experts in the field before the article is published in the journal in order to ensure the article's quality. The article is more likely to be scientifically valid, reach reasonable conclusions, etc. In most cases, the reviewers do not know who the author of the article is, so the article succeeds or fails in its own merit, not the reputation of the expert. And I can tell you, I've done peer reviewed, not professionally yet because not like for publishing, but I am in the process of learning how to do peer review. And it's anonymous. So the person who I'm reviewing for doesn't know who I am. I am reviewing this abstract, for instance, or study methodology. And the person who I am reviewing for, they don't know that I'm who the reviewer is. So that way there's no bias. You see what I'm saying? That's how the review process goes. But that way, the person who is writing the abstract gets to improve their abstract. And I get to tell them, look, this is, I don't tell them directly, but I write in the review, I say, this could be improved this way and this way and this way. Because I know we have the same kind of knowledge on an observational study should be done this way, and you failed in this and this and that. Not fail, I don't say that kind of word, but it could be improved this way. Or an experimental study could be improved this way, and this method that you used, it's lacking this and this and that, or whatever. You see what I'm saying? So we give each other recommendations on how to improve each other's studies designs. That's what peer review is. So other people that know as much as you do can tell you, here's the methodologies, the flaws in your methodology, basically. That's what peer review is. So having looked at all these three, there's more, obviously. There's books, like I said, there's other things. But just out of these three, which one do you think is closer to the principle that we mentioned before? Which one follows this biblical principle more out of all of these? Which one is closer, do you think? Just a question. This is my personal opinion, okay? My personal opinion is that the closest one is peer-reviewed, because it's not just one expert putting out their opinion, but it's several people that have reviewed this. You see what I'm saying? It's not just one individual. It's several people have reviewed this, have put their opinion there and said, no, this is not, if there's a flaw, somebody has reviewed it, somebody's looked at it. Somebody who has the same level of expertise. That's why peer-reviewed is not perfect. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it's the best we have. You see what I'm saying? All right. Having established that, now let's talk about fats, finally. Finally. Because here's where the controversy is, you guys. Isn't it? Oh boy, this is quite controversial. I've talked about this before. I've talked about some of this, of course. And yeah, I know some of this, some of you might not quite like. And on social media, there's people who are saying animal fats are the greatest. Of course, these are not Adventists, hopefully. But there's people out there who are saying, forget about what you have heard the last 50 years. It's been a lie. You should eat as much animal fat as possible. It's all good for you. And if it makes your cholesterol go up, forget it. It's all good. It doesn't matter. It's not bad. And there's people who are saying coconut oil is great. I have said before in True Health Tuesday, be careful with coconut oil. And I will explain to you why. Okay. So as you can see here, coconut oil and animal fats are the same type of fat, saturated fat. See, here's the thing. Most people are like, what in the world is saturated fat? Right? Because the guidelines, so we get guidelines from the government, right? In fact, the last guidelines were released not too long ago by the government, and has, remember the upside down pyramid? And most of these guidelines by the government, they have words like these: eat less saturated fat. They don't say eat less meat, because when they have done that in the past, I don't know if you know this, but when they have done that in the past, the meat industry had a fit, and they said, you can't do that. Don't say eat less meat. So they had to change it to eat less saturated fat, because nobody goes to the store to buy saturated fat. It's ambiguous. It's less clear, right? So, do people know that meat is high in saturated fat? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? It's vague. That's why they put that. They put eat less saturated fat. How would you know if you're eating 10% saturated fat? Are you counting? Nobody's counting. That's why they do that, because it's vague. They don't tell you how many pieces of meat, how many grams. Nobody's going to count grams anyway. But they don't tell you how many times a week you should eat red meat. They don't tell you that, because that would be too clear. They do that on purpose. Okay, so I want to show you something visual. I think this will help I think the visual guide, the visual representation will help. And maybe not, but we'll see. So I want to show you the difference between a saturated fat and a non-saturated fat. Let me put it bigger here. So do you see the top? This is the molecular structure of a saturated fat. And you're like, what? Some of you are like, what am I looking at? This is a molecule. You see a lot of letters there. You're like, what are those letters? These are atoms. The letters are atoms. So the C's are carbon, the H's are hydrogen, okay? The O's oxygen. So what you're looking at here is a molecule of a saturated fat, a fatty acid, basically. And why is it called saturated? The reason why it's called saturated is because the C's, which are carbon, have H's. All the C's have a lot of H's, basically. That's what it is, okay? Each C has to have 4 things around it. And that's what they have. They have this as an H or a C. And they have all around it, they have an H or a C. That's why they're saturated. And what it does, and look at the shape. It's straight. It's not bent. That's what makes saturated fats very stable, that they're like this, straight. And when they're straight like that, they're very stable, which makes them be a solid. That's what you just have to remember. They're solid. Solid, a room temperature. Okay? So just remember this. Saturated fats, the C's have a lot of H's or something else. So it's a chain. Do you see it's a chain of C's? So one C connected to other C's, right? C, 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 C. And the C's have H's, which is hydrogen. And it's straight out. They're not bent. And that means since they're straight like that, they're going to be a very stable molecule, which means it's going to have a higher melting point, which is going to make it a solid at room temperature. Okay? Okay. Now, let's go to the bottom. That's an unsaturated, meaning not saturated. Unsaturated. What does that mean? There's at least one C that is missing an H. One carbon atom that is missing an H. But that can't happen. You cannot have a void there. So when that happens, then that little stick, you see how each C is connected to the H with a stick. Well, that stick has to connect with something. So what it does is that it makes what's called a double bond. So that stick, instead of just being empty, it connects with the other C right next to it. So it makes a double bond. So do you see there over here where the molecule bends? There's a double line. That's called a double bond. So, and what does is that the double bonds makes the molecule bend. So this molecule, by not being straight, makes the molecule more fluid, if you will. So this is going to be a liquid fat. It's a fluid molecule. It's going to make the molecule. It's going to make the fat be a liquid. It's called an unsaturated fatty acid. But do you see the difference right here? It's very visual, right? A saturated fat is going to be boom, straight. An unsaturated fat is going to have a bend, or more than one bend. Oh, more than one. Okay, so we'll see that. Let's look at the next one. Next graphic. Because, now we're going to complicate this picture a little bit, okay? But it's not that much more complicated. Not that much more complicated. Look at this. Look at it with me. There's two types of straight and two types of bent. Do you see that? Do you see that? Are you looking at the screen? Because you have to be looking. This is visual. Okay, well, if you're in the car, don't look. You can look at it later. That's okay. But what I'm going to describe it for you. There's two types of straight molecules and two types of bent molecules, right? Meaning there's saturated fat and something very close to saturated fat. What? And then there's two types of unsaturated fats. Ooh, okay. Interesting. Okay, so let's look at the two top. There's saturated, and then there's something called trans. You've heard of that, right? Trans. So what are trans fats? Are they the same as saturated? No, they're not. What trans fats are is that they actually do have a double bond, but, and this is complicated, but don't worry about it. It's just that the molecules are configured in such a way that they make the bond be almost like a saturated fat. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's almost like a saturated fat. It behaves like a saturated fat because it's straight. They don't occur naturally very much. They occur naturally in dairy products. Not a lot, but in some dairy products, okay? But you can make trans fats artificially by putting extra hydrogen in liquid fats. So you can take a liquid fat, add hydrogen, and you can make it into a trans fat. And that's called a partially hydrogenated oil. And that's what margarine is. And that's what shortening, vegetable shortening is. It's a artificial trans fat. They have been banned in the US for the most part, but they still exist. So the only way that they can be legally sold, if you will, or put into foods is that if the portion or serving has less than 0.5 grams per serving. So if they have 0.49, that's legal. And they will say zero. Because if it has 0.49, legally they can put zero. That's tricky. That's super tricky. So if a food has 0.49 grams of trans fats, they can legally put zero. All they have to do is make the serving size a little smaller. You would not know if you only look at the nutrition label and you are not looking at the ingredients. You have to look at the ingredient list. And if it says partially hydrogenated oil, throw it away. It has trans fats. It's a liquid oil to which hydrogen has been added to make it into an artificial trans fat. It behaves worse than saturated fat. Because saturated fat, I will explain in a little bit, makes LDL go up. Trans fats make LDL go up and HDL, which is the good cholesterol, go down. They're actually worse than saturated fats. That's why they were banned, supposedly. But they can still be used as long as they keep the amounts low enough. So, do you see how they're both similar? Similar in that they're both straight like that, okay? They're both bad. Where is coconut oil, you guys? Where is coconut oil? Do you see it? It's right up there with beef and butter. Coconut oil has more saturated fat than beef and butter, percentage-wise. It's just as bad for your heart and for your arteries. Just look at it. It's in the same category. The fat in it looks the same. It's not any different as far as the molecular structure of the fat. It's the same. There's no double bonds in coconut oil. It will do the same to your heart and your arteries. It's the same. You cannot bend that. You see what I'm saying? You can heat it up. That doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You can melt it, of course. You can make it into a liquid if you melt it enough, but it's not going to change the molecular structure. It's not going to. So it's going to do the same to your heart. So do you see where coconut oil is? Okay. Now, so let's look at the bottom. The bottom is the monounsaturated fats. Those have at least one C missing, therefore there's a double bond, at least one double bond. So it depends on how many there are. One is monounsaturated, one is polyunsaturated. In fact, let me blow them up a little bit so you can see them bigger. Here we have the saturated fats, okay, or trans fats. You see them bigger here? And here we have, this is from a page in Hong Kong. So they put the trans fats, cream soup, puff pastry. Pastries have trans fats because they put shortening. Same with the chicken pie. I think chicken pie, they put the pastry on top and the pastries have shortening. But they have solid or semi-solid. By the way, palm oil. That's the other the other trans fats. So palm oil and shortening. They have saturated fat. Palm oil has saturated fat, but shortening has trans fats. Margarine has trans fats. So these are the examples of straight molecules. So they're the same. Okay, so let's look at the monosaturated fats and unsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. So the polyunsaturated fat will have more than one double bond. So monounsaturated fat, olive oil and avocados, perfect. Now here they're only showing you oil. Fish is also here too, but I recommend as sources not oils, but whole foods instead of the oils. Okay, so I got this graphic with only oils and fish. I would not use fish because fish, now we know, is the most contaminated food source in the human food supply because of all the chemicals that end up in the ocean, all the plastic that ends up in the ocean, all the mercury, heavy metals. So I would not use fish as a source of polyunsaturated fatty acids. I would use flax and chia. That's a much better source. Polyunsaturated fatty acids, by the way, are essential. Your body does not produce them. You have to get them from the diet. So those are your omega-3 and omega-6s. But the best source are not fish. The best sources are chia and hemp seeds and flax seeds, actually, walnuts and other things like that. So you don't have to get these fats from oils. You can get them from whole foods like olives, like nuts, seeds, avocados. Okay. So again, the monounsaturated is one bend, and poly is more than one. So that's it. That's it. That's what it means. But instead of actually increasing the risk for heart disease, they decrease. Even the oil, you guys, I'm not even going to go into this because of lack of time, but there's so much misinformation about oil, seed oils. And this would require a whole show, a whole different program just to dispel the myths about seed oils. It's all a lie, actually. Oh my goodness. There's so much misinformation about the seed oils. I don't recommend eating the seed oils because it's actually better to eat the seeds, but they do not create heart disease. It's the saturated fats that give you the heart disease and inflammation, not the seed oils. I'm not going to go into it right now because of lack of time, because I have to show you other things that are actually more important today. So I'm going to show you some quotes from Spirit of Prophecy. This is because I really want to show you. This is too important to not show it to you. Okay. Counsels on diet and food regarding healthy fats. When properly prepared, olives, monounsaturated fats, like nuts, supply the place of butter and flesh meat, saturated fats. The oil, olive oil, as eaten in the olive is far preferable to animal oil or fat. Look at the following. Nuts and nut foods are coming largely into use to take the place of flesh meats. With nuts may be combined grains, fruit, and some roots to make foods that are healthful and nourishing. Care should be taken, however, not to use too large proportion of nuts. See, I've told you before, don't eat 2 cups of nuts a day. Some people do. I've talked to people who are like, oh yeah, nuts are very healthy. And I put half a cup of this and half a cup of that and half a cup of this in my smoothie. And I'm like, that's like 2 cups altogether. Oh yeah, that's so good. That's too many nuts. Only have a quarter of a cup in one day. Okay, so anyway, so you see here regarding, so Spirit of Prophecy is telling us here, what are the better sources of fat here? Saturated or unsaturated? What do you see here? What do you see? Olives. What kind of fat is that? Saturated from what we saw before? No, that's monounsaturated. Nuts, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. That's not saturated. So what is, to the law and the testimony, what are the best sources of fat? Okay, let's continue. The meat is served reeking with fat because it suits the what? Perverted taste. Both, oh, look at this. Both the blood and the fat of animals are consumed as a luxury, but the Lord gave special directions that these should not be eaten. That was given in the Bible. Most people don't even take that into account. The Bible says not to eat the fat. Even when you're given permission to eat meat, you're not supposed to eat the fat of the meat or the blood. The Lord gave special directions that these should not be eaten. Why? Because their use would make a diseased current of blood in the human system. See, Ellen White did not know what cholesterol was, did not know what LDL was, did not know what triglycerides were. She only used the words that were known to her in that time. So she would say the things that were appropriate in her time. So she used disease current of blood in the human system. She didn't know it would elevate your cholesterol. She didn't know what cholesterol was. But that's what it means, in my view. The disregard for the Lord's special direction has brought a variety of difficulties and diseases upon human beings. If they introduced into their system that which cannot make good flesh and blood, they must endure the results of their disregard of God's word. What else do I need to say? So let's go to the Bible, you guys, to the law and the testimony. Leviticus 7, 22, 23. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, you shall not eat any fat of ox or sheep or goat. Leviticus 3:17. This shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations in all your dwellings. You shall eat neither fat nor blood. It was forbidden in biblical times to eat animal fat or the blood. It was forbidden. You could eat the meat, but not the fat of animals. And let's remember again, what kind of fat is animal fat that God forbade? What kind of fat did God forbid? Saturated. That's the kind of fat that the Bible forbids. It doesn't say it's saturated because that word was not used in biblical times. But God did not allow humans to eat the fat of animals. I'm not saying it. The Bible is saying it. Look at this. Fruits, grains, and vegetables. Are those carbohydrates, by the way? Let's see. Fruits, grains. Yeah, those are carbohydrates. And vegetables, prepared in a simple way, free from spice and what? Grease of all kinds. Make with milk and cream. Remember, in those times, she was still using milk. And then she says, there will come a time when we will not be able to use milk anymore. The most healthful diet. Next, food should be prepared with simplicity, yet with a nicety, which will invite the appetite. You should keep grease out of all your foods. Grease. Think of that word, grease. What does it mean? What's grease? What's grease? Because she talked about oil before, and she said even the oil of olives is healthy. So obviously she didn't mean oil. So what's grease? It's not oil. You should keep grease out of your food. It defiles any preparation of food you make. So what's grease? The grease cooked in the food renders it difficult of digestion. Eat regularly and eat only food that is free from grease. She says it over and over again. To the law and the testimony. So it's in the Bible. Do not eat the fat of animals. And over here it says, free from grease. What's grease? What do you think is grease? Now, I think the closest thing in the vegetable kingdom to animal fat is coconut oil. It's actually worse because it has more percentage or higher percentage of saturated fat. It's actually worse for your heart than butter, for instance, or than lard. So it's a grease. In my view, this is my opinion, okay? But it's a grease in the sense that it's solid fat. Look at it again. Let's make the comparison. The top and the bottom. See the difference between the oils or the fat at the top, where coconut oil is. So you see they're straight, just like the butter, just like the beef fat. And the bottom oils. Do you see the difference visually? The coconut oil is a straight fat, straight, saturated, whereas the oil from the olives is not straight, it's bent. Same like flax oil, same like the fat from the avocado. So again, we have three types of fat: the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is the unsaturated, which there's two kinds, like we said, the mono and the poly. Mono only has one double bond, and poly has two or more. So you have your omega-6, your omega-3, the avocados, the olive oil or olives. And then you have the bad, which is saturated, and they're really bad. That's your trans. Because they're, again, the saturated fat elevates your bad cholesterol. The trans fats elevate your bad cholesterol and lower your good cholesterol. That's double bad. That's why it's really, really bad. That's what's a good, bad, and ugly. The ugly is trans fats. So what do the influencer doctors say? They say the exact opposite, you guys. They say saturated fats are good for you. Whereas the science says they increase cholesterol in the blood. They increase the total cholesterol and they increase LDL cholesterol. They say cholesterol is okay. It's okay if your LDL goes up. Whereas the science proved that if your LDL cholesterol goes up, that elevates your risk for the number one cause of death in the country and in the world, which is cardiovascular disease. CVD means cardiovascular disease. That's the number one cause of death. 700,000 people die every year, just in the US, just in 1 year. And that's every single year. And that's the number one cause of death in the world. Most countries is the number one cause of death. Cardiovascular disease comes from carbs, they say. That is not proven by any data. No data says that. There's no good, solid data that proves that anywhere. They tell you, of course, then eat a low-carb diet. That's what they say. And we saw the quotes from Spirit of Prophecy. What are the foods we're supposed to eat? Is it low carb? Fruits, grains, vegetables, are they low carb? Eat a low carb diet is an advice that's completely contrary to Bible and spirit of prophecy. So if you're going to go by Isaiah 8:20, this advice is against Isaiah 8:20. Sorry, I'm sorry to say that, but it is. Now, there's some cases where you have to eat a low carb diet or a keto diet for specific cases for therapeutic causes. For instance, a keto diet for people who have epilepsy that does not respond to medication. And you can eat a keto diet that is plant-based. And let me tell you something. A keto diet that is not plant-based has, when it was created, especially, they knew that those children, it was mostly used in children who had epilepsy. Those children had long-term negative consequences of following the keto diet, which were cardiovascular disease and cancer. So you treat one thing, but there's the side effects of using the keto diet. Now, when I talk about fasting, I told you what the original keto diet was. And I already said, because I gave you the clue, fasting is the original keto diet. Because doing fasting has the exact same effects. But it's hard to fast children, right? But it does elevate ketones in the brain. Anyway, we don't have time for that right now. But anyway, so you can use a keto diet. You don't have to eat meat and cheese all day long to have those effects, those positive effects. But let's go back to the original diet, okay? A whole food plant-based diet. That's what the original diet is. It's not a low carb diet at all. God says, Genesis 1:29, you guys, is the first page of the Bible. Is it a low carb diet? I now give you every seed bearing plant on the face of the entire earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Is that a low carb diet? What do you think? Then let's go to Counsels on Diet and Foods, also Ministry of Healing, page 296. Grains, is that low carb? Fruit, is that low carb? Nuts and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by who? Our Creator. These foods, prepared in as simple and natural a manner as possible, are the most healthful in nourishing. I didn't say it. To the law and the testimony. Law, testimony. They impart a strength, a power of endurance, and vigor of intellect. That's very important. Intellect, the brain, that are not afforded by a more complex and stimulating diet. So, what are the benefits of a plant-based diet? Lower in saturated fat, very low. It's mostly mono and polyunsaturated fats. And I recommend whole foods because they have the fiber. Yes, you can eat the oils, you can consume the oils. Olive oil, if you were going to consume an oil, I would say the number one healthy oil would be extra virgin, cold press olive oil, or any cold press extra virgin like avocado or something. But it's much better to get them from the whole foods. Why? Because the whole foods, like nuts, seeds, avocado, even olives, have the other nutrients, like fiber. If you only take the oil, it has zero fiber, zero minerals, zero of most vitamins. It might have some traces, some polyphenols, some vitamin here and there. But most nutrients are gone. There's no fiber whatsoever, none, zero. So you're missing out on the other benefits of these whole foods, and you're absorbing most of the fat really quick. So for weight loss purposes, it's not helpful to eat the oils, not helpful at all, in fact. Even for lowering your cholesterol and triglycerides and all these other things, it's not helpful. I've seen it with my own eyes. When people go on an oil-free diet, cholesterol drops really quickly, really quickly. That's what I use at work. An oil-free diet, cholesterol goes boom, very fast. I can just tell you from personal and professional experience what I've seen. So a whole food plant-based diet, high in fiber, not only helps to lower cholesterol, helps to lower glucose. It also free from trans fats because there's no margarine, no hydrogenated oils, no dairy. Dairy also has naturally occurring trans fats. And you avoid processed foods, of course. So no sugar, no refined flours, hopefully, no junk food, no empty calories. We already seen this, sorry for the double. Okay, but I wanted to show you that there is science behind the things that I have told you, okay? Because these influencers will actually say that first of all, they will say that these saturated fat does not elevate cholesterol. Okay, there's literally hundreds of studies that show saturated fats elevate cholesterol. Okay, so this is a systematic review and meta-analysis that see, it says right here, the reductions in LDL cholesterol were largest when the saturated fats and trans fats were replaced in the diet with MUFAs and PUFAs. What's MUFAs and PUFAs? Monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids. So when they took out the trans fats and the saturated fatty acids from the diet and put in instead the mono and polyunsaturated fatty acids, that's when they saw the largest reductions in cholesterol and LDL particularly. So that's why I highlighted it for you. Largest reduction in LDL cholesterol when replacing the saturated fat. This is a meta-analysis. That's when they take hundreds and hundreds. These are at least dozens, if not hundreds. In fact, we have here a what's called a consensus paper. There's literally hundreds of papers here that show that LDL, because this is another thing that will tell you, LDL does not cause, or cholesterol does not cause heart disease. There's hundreds, not one person, you guys. That's why there's a biblical principle. You need the testimony of more than one person or whatever. Here we have hundreds of studies, peer-reviewed studies. And peer-reviewed studies are more than one person. There's many, many people who review the study. And here we have hundreds of studies, meaning there's thousands of people who have come up with this same conclusion. LDL cholesterol, which more broadly, now we know that is actually something called ApoB, which is a lipoprotein, or which is actually a marker in lipoproteins. So if you can get your ApoB tested, it's better than even LDL, but it's okay. If LDL is all you could get tested, that's fine. LDL cholesterol is a cause of atherosclerosis, which is when the arteries get hardened with the plaque that causes heart disease. There's hundreds of studies over the years that have confirmed it. It's not just one study, it's hundreds. And not just, you don't have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70. Literally, when you're young and you don't show any disease whatsoever, even normal cholesterol already shows plaque formation. So unless your LDL is very, very low, there's almost like no such a thing as too low cholesterol, too low LDL, no such thing. Because there's already plaque formation in children, as I've showed you before. Okay, so there's no such a thing. In fact, they have even said here in this particular article says tolerable upper intake level. No such thing either. Because any intake, right here, any intake above 0% of either saturated fat, trans fats, or cholesterol, dietary cholesterol. And I've done a presentation on eggs because some of these influencers will say, don't worry about eating eggs. They're healthy. Eat as many as you want. They're not bad for you. Eggs are the number one source of cholesterol in the diet. They're the most concentrated. So here, any amount of saturated fat, trans fats, or dietary cholesterol increases LDL cholesterol. That LDL cholesterol is the cholesterol in your blood. Here they're talking about dietary cholesterol. Not as much as saturated fat. Saturated fat is the one that increases the most, and trans fats. But dietary cholesterol does increase your LDL cholesterol. Now, why am I saying all of this? Sorry, I'm going a little bit above time, but here is the implication of all of this for us. Look at this. And I've talked about this before when I talked about nutrition and the brain, but I didn't show you the cover or the title. Look at this. Cholesterol in Alzheimer's disease and other amyloidogenic disorders, basically the brain, okay? The body of evidence, I'm just reading the highlighted part. You might not be able to see, it's too small, but it says the body of evidence for a link between cholesterol in atherosclerosis and Alzheimer's disease is increasing, along with an associated inflammatory response. Link between cholesterol in atherosclerosis and Alzheimer's disease, okay? And now, this I've showed you before. This is in Nutrition and the Brain, part 1, because there's 2. And what this is showing us is the level of cholesterol in the brains of people with no disease, that's the white bar, and Alzheimer's disease, the black bar. So what we see here is that people with Alzheimer's disease had much higher levels of cholesterol. So does cholesterol not matter? It matters. Not just for your heart. It matters for your brain. If that's not clear enough, let me show you the picture. The top arteries are people without Alzheimer's. Look at the bottom picture. These are the arteries of the brain of people with Alzheimer's. Do you see what's inside those arteries? Take a closer look. What do you think that is doing to the brain? What do you think that's doing to your thinking ability, to your cognitive capacity? Having arteries like that in your brain. So eating all that coconut oil will do that. I'm sorry to say. I'm just being very blunt. It's what it is. Functional consequences of brain exposure to saturated fatty acids from energy metabolism and insulin resistance to neuronal damage. This is in the brain. Insulin resistance in the brain. Neuronal damage. And I'm just going to read you the conclusion part real quick. Understanding the mechanisms that lead to metabolic alterations in neurons. You know what neurons are, right? They're brain cells. Induced by what again? Look, saturated fatty acids. Coconut oil is 80% saturated fatty acids, you guys. That's twice as much as lard. Again, understanding the mechanisms that lead to metabolic alterations in neurons induced by saturated fatty acids could help to develop several strategies for the prevention and treatment of what? Cognitive impairment. Cognitive impairment associated with what? Insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, or type 2 diabetes. Here they're talking about the brain. And this is a great paper. I invite you to read it. I invite you to download it, read it. Okay, this is all from the same paper. Part 2. It's talking about fatty acid uptake in the brain. Several studies have shown that fatty acids are able to cross the blood-brain barrier and enter the brain to be taken up by endothelial cells, glial cells, and neurons. So that fatty acid you're consuming, it goes to the brain. Are neurons able to metabolize fatty acids to produce energy? That's part 3. I just want to highlight the part that's in yellow here. For this reason, ATP production, that's energy production, for fatty acids is scarce in neurons. In other words, neurons are not able to produce energy. When fatty acids must be oxidized in mitochondria, that's not a good thing. By metabolic situation, this metabolic route produces high ROS levels. That's oxidation. That's reactive oxidative species levels, making neurons susceptible to oxidative damage. So in other words, neurons are not able to use fats for energy. Therefore, the fat gets oxidized in the brain. That is bad. Okay, that's not good. That's not good. That's not good for you. Okay, it goes on. Part 4 talks about alterations in neuronal metabolism associated with the intake of saturated fat. What's in your coconut oil again? There is strong correlation between chronic intake of a high-fat diet. That's HFD. That's the keto diet, you guys. A high-fat diet. HFD. There's not to mention the carnivore diet, which used to be a French diet. That is 100% high fat. Okay, hear me out. There is a strong correlation between chronic intake of high fat diet and the development of neuroinflammation and brain insulin resistance. Going down. I'm just highlighting some parts. I can't read the whole paper to you. Insulin resistance could interfere with brain glucose utilization, resulting in compensatory increase of saturated fat uptake and oxidation. Going down, To explain some of the brain alterations produced by high intake of saturated fat, several mechanisms have been analyzed and proposed as potential drivers of brain pathology. Diseased brain, that's what it means. Pathology. Among them, mitochondrial dysfunction, neuroinflammation, inflammation in the brain, oxidative damage are prominent. In fact, a high fat diet intake directly enhances ROS generation. That's oxidative stress. Do you need more? 7, association between fatty acid metabolism and Alzheimer's disease. Comorbidities associated with high intake of saturated fat, such as obesity and type 2 diabetes, are risk factors for the development of cognitive impairments and even Alzheimer's disease. By the way, when I did part 1 of nutrition in the brain, we talked about how mild cognitive impairment can happen many years before Alzheimer's disease. You can have mild cognitive impairment for years before Alzheimer's disease even shows up. So, it's hard for me to say this, but do you see why Satan is doing this? Inside the church, he wants our brains to be clogged up, to not be able to think clearly. If we're eating lots of saturated fat, we're not going to be able to think clearly. The battle is for your mind. Your diet can definitely affect your mind. If you don't believe me, go back and watch Nutrition and the Brain Part 1 and 2. A healthy body means a healthy mind and vice versa. That's why it's so important to consume the right fats. I talked about this in those 2 presentations. And now I'm explaining to you with more detail why consuming saturated fat is so damaging. And the difference, so you can see it clearly, visually. If you didn't believe me before, hopefully you believe me now. Hopefully. The battle's for your mind. And Satan's out to get you in your mind, because we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world. And there's little time left. Against spiritual wickedness in high places. But what are we called to do? We're striving for a crown. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. 1 Corinthians 9:24-27. Are we disciplining our bodies and treating it truly like a temple? Yeah? Reminder. This is how we treat the body, like a temple. Don't listen to those people out there, you guys. Don't listen to the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, to the law and the testimony. Isaiah 8:20. I can't repeat it enough. I have given you every seed bearing plant. It's a plant based diet, no matter what others say. It's not a low carb diet. Carbs are not the cause of disease. Fats are not the answer. Sorry. I showed you. Grease is bad for you. I showed you. Go back, watch it again if you need to. God said, do not eat the fat of animals. Why? Because it's bad for you. It has saturated fat. Fruit. Every tree that has fruit with seed in it, that's a carb. They will be your food. Grains, fruit, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. That's a carb, high carb diet. So the law and the testimony. I didn't say it. I am not saying this. This is the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. If we are not aware and familiar with what the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, we will be deceived. Plainly. That's just truth. This is it. This is your ideal plate. Fruits and vegetables, grains, water to drink, healthy fats. Where are the healthy fats from? Nuts, seeds, olives, avocado, and vegetable protein. That's it. These are your main sources of good fats. Whole, hopefully, whole, not processed, not the oils, but the actual whole foods with this fiber, ideally. These are the benefits. The monounsaturated fats of the olives, of the avocado also. Monounsaturated and also polyunsaturated. The fibers, the essential vitamins and minerals. The seeds, like sesame seeds have calcium like you would not believe. And of course, the omega-3 fatty acids from the flax seeds and chia seeds and hemp seeds. I mean, the lignins, amazing. The nuts, the almonds, just can talk about all day about the benefits, right? But that's what God gave us. That's what God has given us. Okay. So I went a little bit too long, but I just think it's important. I just think it's important to clarify what God says. And I want to leave you my website once again, healthfortoday.net. So this is the last program. But of course, since we've made so many shows during the last year, I'm sure there will be replaying some of them, hopefully. But this is my website. And as you know, you can download in my website the 10-day menu. So you can go to healthfortoday.net, download the 10-day menu where you can get the 10-day menu for a whole food plant-based diet and the recipes. Okay, so you're more than welcome to go there and do that. So thank you for tuning in. And I won't be seeing you, I guess, until we start again, whenever the producers say we start again, I think in September or October, sometime around there. But thank you so much, you guys, for all your support, for all your comments and all the support you have given me during this time. And if you have any particular suggestions for topics or questions, let me know. Go there and let me know. And I will look into that and see which ones we can make a whole presentation about. Okay, so let's finish with a word of prayer. And I hope you have a really, really good summer, and we'll see you again at the end. Okay, let's have a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord, for all your blessings and all the wonderful truths you have given us. And thank you for giving us the guidance. And thank you for giving us the Bible and the spirit of prophecy so that we can have this anchor of truth that's now validated by science. But we had these truths even before science was able to confirm what your word and your prophet was telling us all along. Thank you, Lord, for giving us this guidance now that we can trust and that we know is the truth that we can trust always. And help us, Lord, to be humble enough to accept it and to live it and to be able to be a light to other people, to share this with other people who might be suffering, the effects of maybe incorrect diet and lifestyle. Help us to work like you worked and take this message to others so that they may be healed. And be with us the rest of today and this evening, and be a blessing. Bless this church and help us to be a blessing to those around us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So thank you again for being here, and I hope to see you soon. And God bless you, and have a really good night. Thank you, and see you soon. God bless you. Good night.